Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves. Today, we're going to explore the current trade policy landscape, really try to get a handle on how these policies are affecting different companies and who's coming out ahead and who's facing challenges.
Right. And to understand that, you need the basics of what's actually in place. So there's a baseline tariff, 10%. They're calling it reciprocal.
Mm,
But the really impactful moves are the targeted ones, specifically steel and aluminum tariffs jumping way up to 50%. That's a big number.
50% on basic materials like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are we seeing as the immediate result, the kind of headline impact?
Well, it seems pretty clear these tariffs are adding to inflation pressure. That's one thing. And maybe more importantly, they're creating instability, makes supply chain planning much more difficult. For small and medium businesses, the SMEs, it's particularly tough. Strains their cash flow, tightens up credit.
So the really big companies, they can manage this better.
Generally, yes. The Walmarts, the Costcos, they have more options. They can absorb some costs, maybe negotiate better or pass things along. Smaller firms, they just don't have that flexibility. They get squeezed.
Okay, if the smaller guys are feeling the pressure, let's talk about who isn't. Or maybe who's even, benefiting from this. Who wins when import taxes on things like steel go up to 50%?
The first place to look, naturally, is U.S. steel and aluminum producers themselves. It's almost a textbook case of protectionism working for them, that 50% tariff. It basically builds a wall around the domestic market. And here's the thing you need to remember. Demand for steel, for aluminum, it's not that flexible.
People just need it.
Exactly. You need it for construction, for cars, for all sorts of things. So domestic producers can raise prices, and they don't have to worry as much about cheaper foreign competition undercutting them. This helps their pricing, it boosts their production rates, their utilization, and it flows right down to better margins and cash flow.
So they're not just surviving, they're actively doing better because buyers don't have many other places to turn domestically. Which companies are we talking about specifically, the ones set up to gain here?
Yeah, the main ones we're tracking are Nucor, that's ticker NUE. Then there's U.S. Steel, ticker X. Also Alcoa, ticker AA, and Century Aluminum, ticker CENX. Their operations are really positioned to take advantage of this domestic pricing power.
Okay, so protection helps the input producers. What about the companies actually buying goods from overseas? The retailers. How does anyone who depends on global sourcing win here? Seems counterintuitive.
It does, but this is where scale becomes a huge advantage. We call this group the scale retailers with pricing power. Think about how complex their operations are. These huge chains, they have teams just focused on sourcing, finding where to get stuff made.
They're not locked into one supplier or one country.
Precisely. They can shift production. If tariffs make it expensive to source from China, maybe they look harder at Vietnam or Mexico or somewhere else. They can pivot in ways a small boutique retailer just can't. It takes massive logistical capability.
Right, so the volume helps them diversify risk, and their sheer size must give them some negotiating power too.
Absolutely. They can demand better terms from vendors because they buy so much. And crucially, they often have what we call pricing power. That means you, the shopper, might be willing to pay a little bit more for the convenience or the brand they offer. So if their costs go up slightly from tariffs, they can often pass that increase along more easily than a smaller competitor.
And the names here are the ones you'd expect, the giants of retail.
Exactly. We're talking Walmart, ticker WMT, Costco, ticker COST, and Target, ticker TGT. Their whole system is built to manage this kind of complexity, and it actually becomes a competitive edge against smaller shops in this environment.
Okay, we've got the material producers and the big retailers. Now, if trade is getting more complicated, more rules, more tariffs, does that create an opening for anyone else?
It does. It's a category people sometimes forget about. Customs brokers and freight forwarders. Think about it. Every new tariff, every new regulation, every change in trade rules means more paperwork, more complex routing, more compliance headaches to move goods across borders.
So the people who navigate all that red tape.
Exactly. The complexity itself drives demand for their specialized services. Brokerage, trade management, compliance advice.
So it's not just inflation making their services cost more, it's that the job itself gets harder and requires more expertise.
That's a great way to put it. Even if the total volume of stuff being shipped around the world dips a bit because of trade friction, the amount they can charge per shipment, the fee yield, can actually go up because each shipment needs more careful handling, more knowledge, more risk assessment. They charge a premium for managing that hassle.
Makes sense. More complexity means more business for the experts who understand it.
And the companies here. Look at Expeditors International, ticker EXP, and C.H. Robinson, ticker CHRW. Their whole business model is about smoothing out these friction points in global trade. More friction can actually mean more opportunity for them.
All right, let's flip the coin now. We've talked winners. Let's shift to the companies feeling the pressure. Where are these trade policies hitting hardest?
Well, the first group that really feels it is often the small cap apparel and specialty retailers. These are companies that rely very heavily on importing finished goods, clothes, accessories, home goods, that sort of thing. So those tariffs get slapped right onto the cost of their inventory before it even hits their warehouses. It bumps up their landed costs significantly.
And unlike the big guys, they probably can't just tell their factories overseas to absorb that cost increase.
Exactly. They don't have the leverage with suppliers, and they often don't have strong pricing power with consumers either. It's a tough spot. This creates a real margin squeeze. Let's say their cost of goods sold, but they pay for the inventory goes up 10% because of tariffs. Can they just raise prices 10%?
Probably not, without losing customers to competitors or those big chains.
Right. So what happens? They often have to resort to more promotions, more sales, deeper discounts just to move the inventory. That eats directly into their gross margins and makes it much tougher to turn a profit.
So we might see more sales signs, but it's actually a sign of stress for the company's finances because of these policies.
That's often the case. You see this pressure on companies like Levi Strauss, ticker LEVI, American Eagle, ticker AEO, and Urban Outfitters, URBN. They're in very competitive markets where margins are already pretty tight.
Okay, that direct impact on retail is clear. But how does this kind of pressure spread? Does it affect other sectors, like finance?
It definitely can. It creates potential vulnerability for regional banks, specifically those with significant exposure to small to medium enterprises, the SMEs. Remember how we said SMEs get squeezed by higher costs and supply chain issues?
Yeah, their cash flow gets tight.
Exactly. And when cash flow gets tight, paying back loans becomes harder. So the risk of delinquencies on loans made to these small businesses goes up. For regional banks, SME lending can be a really important part of their business. So if the trade environment makes things tougher for their small business clients, the banks feel it through increased credit risk on their loan books.
So it's like a second-order effect. Trade policy hits small businesses, and then the banks holding their loans feel the impact.
Precisely. It's an indirect link, but it's definitely there. Trade policy can ripple through to financial stability in that way.
Are there specific banks where this exposure is more of a factor?
Based on their loan portfolios, some names to watch would be Zions Bancorp, ticker ZION, Comerica, ticker CMA, and First Horizon, ticker FHN. The health of their SME borrowers is pretty key for them.
Got it. Okay, last category of losers. We've done retail, we've done banks lending to small businesses. What about manufacturers who aren't making steel, but using imported stuff?
Right. These are the import-dependent consumer goods makers. So companies that make finished products but rely heavily on bringing in components, parts, or maybe even fully assembled items from overseas. For them, tariffs directly increase their cost of goods sold, their COGS. Simple as that. The bill for their inputs goes up.
And I'm guessing scale matters here too, just like in retail. Smaller manufacturers have fewer ways to deal with this.
You nailed it. Smaller companies in this space often don't have the scale or maybe the financial sophistication to do complex hedging strategies to offset rising costs. And like the small retailers, they often have limited pricing power. They can't just pass every cost increase along to their customers, whether those are distributors or end consumers.
So they're caught in the middle. Costs are rising, but they can't easily raise their prices.
That's the squeeze, exactly. It hits their operating profit directly, their EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes. It just gets compressed.
Which companies fit this description?
We're looking at firms like Helen of Troy, ticker HELE, Lifetime Brands, ticker LCUT, and Miller Knoll, ticker MLKN. Their profitability can be really sensitive to the cost of those imported components.
Okay, this really paints a picture of winners and losers based on, well, scale and where you sit in the supply chain. On one hand, you've got domestic producers like steel companies shielded by tariffs and the giant retailers using their size and logistics to navigate it all, maybe even gain an edge. But on the other, you see smaller import-reliant businesses, apparel, specialty goods, some manufacturers really feeling the pinch, and then the regional banks connected to those smaller businesses feel it too.
Yeah, the key takeaway for you listening is that these policies don't hit everyone the same way at all. It really depends. The ability to, say, shift production from one country to another quickly or to demand discounts because you buy in huge quantities, those things make a massive difference under these kinds of trade rules. So looking ahead, if you see more talk about trade barriers, tariffs going up or down, maybe ask yourself, which companies have flexible supply chains, which ones can move, and which ones are kind of stuck sourcing from potentially more expensive places. That flexibility or lack of it seems to be a huge differentiator right now.
That's a really practical point to consider. Now, before we wrap up, just a standard reminder for everyone. This conversation is for informational purposes only. It's not financial advice, and it's definitely not a recommendation to buy or sell any specific stock or security. It's purely the opinion of the author of the material we discussed.